My name is Daveron and I'm a Galway man. I'm now living and working in Dublin for the best part of 17 years. And I'm a solicitor by profession. I was involved in the case Roach versus Roach. And in that particular case, it was where a husband and wife separated and they had 3 embryos in storage in a fertility clinic. And the wife, in that particular case, was saying that they were my 3 unborn children and that I wanted to have the right to implant them in my womb to give them the chance of life. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we argued from a legal perspective that those embryos, which is a sperm and egg fused together, which creates an embryo, we were arguing that life began at fertilization and conception, and if you believe that life begins at that point in time, then they are the unborn under our Constitution, which under Article 43.3 defines that we have to give constitutional protection to the unborn. So we were arguing that the embryo is the unborn under our Constitution and is deserving of constitutional protection. And the only way that the embryo's rights can be protected is allowing them to be implanted in the mother's womb. Once the embryo implants in the mother's womb, then you get constitutional protection under Article 43.3, and that's what we're all voting on the 25th of May. And actually that case saved the people in having to bring a referendum to define what the unborn meant. So it's very much linked into what the 8th Amendment is all about, and that's why I have a specific interest in the current debate that is in front of the people today. I was a young solicitor at the time when I got that case, and it was definitely a life-changing experience. I never thought that I'd be sitting in a courtroom debating when life began, and this was just something that you read in legal textbooks or you saw in the movies. It was just absolutely fascinating, and it really brought home to me the value of life and the significance of life. And that brings us all back again now to the 8th Amendment, is something that is where we all have to sit down and think, where is Ireland going? What do we really want to stand for? What do we want to prioritise in our society? And have we really thought this one through? Is it being really properly debated? Have the politicians given us all the options? Is it all being laid bare for the Irish people to make an informed decision? I think what's happening at this is there are too many interest groups out there that are forcing their opinion on people. And I think what the Irish people deserve is the facts. They've deserved the truth and the facts. I want to point out a fact, and I'm very interested in facts. And I'd only base my decision on facts when I go to vote in this referendum. So what are the facts? It has always been legally permissible in Ireland to perform life-saving medical treatment on a pregnant mother, even if it unintentionally or unavoidably would result in the death of her unborn child. That has always been legally permissible in this country. What is illegal is the intentional killing of the child. And if you believe what everybody's saying at the moment, that Ireland, because we do not have abortion, that it's a dangerous place for a pregnant mother to be in, that Ireland is a dangerous country, that the facts are simply as this, is that Ireland is one of the safest countries in the world to have a baby. Ireland ranks in the top league in the world in terms of safety for pregnant women. That's a fact. The latest figures from the maternal death inquiry shows Ireland lower than both Britain and the USA, which have abortion on demand. Pregnancy as a result of rape. This is the one that we're hearing all the time. We need to get rid of the 8th Amendment. We need to get rid of the protection of the unborn child because we need to deal with pregnancy as a result of rape. There was a very famous case called the C case. And in that, a young girl became pregnant after she was raped, and she was only 13 years of age. And she was granted an abortion under the X case ruling. She's now subsequently a mother many years later. And what she said was, "You never forget your missing baby. It plays on your mind." And interestingly enough, she says, trauma of abortion is harder to get over than the rape. Why are we not bringing in mandatory sentencing for rapists, sending out a clear signal
that rapists will be dealt with harshly. The politicians could do that straight away. They could be looking at what we can do to help the rape victim. But the solution they've come up with is abortion. I remember I had a debate with a friend of mine about the Eighth Amendment, and what they said to me was, "But Alan, come on, if my daughter was raped, I'd really have to consider an abortion for her." And I said to her, "Mary," I said, "have you thought this one through, have you? Have you really thought this one through?" And she says, "What do you mean?" Well, I said, first of all, I said, we have to acknowledge that that child is 50% the DNA of your daughter. That's your daughter's child you're talking about. And by the way, Mary, it's your grandchild. The Rape Crisis Network Ireland 2015 annual report. Okay. And this is what they say. Of the female survivors attending the Rape Crisis Centres in 2015 who were raped, 5% became pregnant as a result of rape. 76% of the 5% that were raped, that became pregnant, did not opt for termination.
I think what's important, we're talking about a mother and her baby, so there has to be compassion and love and understanding, and this is what's important. But I think what is happening at the moment is that the whole thing is being polarized. In a sense, what I'm particularly interested in is the mother and her baby. And why is it that a mother finds that she has no option but to have a termination, to terminate the life of her unborn child?
It was just as the Citizens' Assembly was making all its recommendations, I happened to meet somebody that I know, and we just happened to talk about children. And I just asked her, she's around the same age as myself, and I asked her, "How many children do you have?" And she said, "I have 3 children, but I lost one." And I said to her, "Oh, I am so sorry. What happened?" And then she turned around and she said, "Oh, my son was one of these fatal fetal abnormalities that everybody's talking about at the moment." And if I said to her, what's your take on the fatal fetal abnormality? Like, you've had a personal experience. And she said, "I feel very cross." And I said to her, "Why do you feel cross?" And she said, "I feel cross," she said, "because don't use me and my little boy's story to bring in abortion on demand. If you want to bring it in, just bring it in," she said. "But don't use my little boy's story for that. My little boy was a fighter," she said, "and every day he fought, I was at his side," she said. "And the day he gave up, I was going to be there with them. So every day he lived, I was going to be with them. And the day he couldn't fight anymore for his life, I was going to be at his side," she said. "I am his mother." They're being possibly advised by doctors or whatever, go and have a termination. Just get it over and done with. Try again. It doesn't matter, but it does matter. Because you can have the termination, but you cannot abort the pain of losing the child. You cannot abort the fact that you were a mother. I was just listening there on Radio 1 when Dr. McGuinness was talking about life-limiting conditions. And what he said is that they only account for 1%, that 99% are healthy babies, 1% are for those babies that have life-limiting conditions. So what are the politicians asking us to do? They're asking us to scrap the Eighth Amendment. Remember, these are people that wanted to have their babies, but they died because their babies were unhealthy. And what we're asked now to do is for that small percentage of families that go through that rendering pain, that they're asking us to have compassion for them. We need to get rid of the Eighth Amendment, get rid of all protection for all our children of Ireland, just to help this one small section of society. For a woman to go over and to have an abortion and to abort her own child, what a decision to make. What a lonely place to be. And I just say to people, first of all, let's give the women the options first. Let's talk to them. Let's find out why they're scared to continue with the pregnancy.
So when I hear people talking about my right to bodily integrity, I'm saying is, well, you have that right because your mother gave you the right to life. In a sense is that we cannot compartmentalize things. We have to look at things in the bigger picture. And all rights flow from one fundamental right, which is the right to life.
When we're talking about disability and all of that, that's one of the main reasons that I'm doing these talks, because I believe in standing up for the rights of those who've been discriminated against. When I think about the Special Olympics in Ireland, people say that it was possibly one of the most successful events ever in the history of that organisation when it was held in Ireland. And why was that? And I know the answer. The answer very clearly is this, is that we embrace disability. We don't shy away from it, we don't abort it, we don't brush it under the carpet, we embrace it. And let's look at our neighbours where they have abortion. So 90% of UK babies that have Down syndrome are aborted. In Denmark, they're really good at Denmark, they're aiming by 2030 to have no Down syndrome in their society. And Iceland get the A++, they have no Down syndrome in Iceland. Is this a civilized society? Is this something that we should embrace? For years, people with disabilities have been discriminated against. And we've been fighting for years to get them equality. And so what are we going to do? We're going to abort them all now? Is that what we're going to do? I remember I had a conversation with this particular person who happened to be a principal of a school. And he said to me, there was one year, he said, there was a Down syndrome child in our school. And he said, because the child wasn't intellectually able to get into the A class, the child ended up in kind of the lower class. And he said the parents wanted this child to have the most normal education as possible and to be treated normally. And why not? And he says, you know now down the bad class, what goes on down the bad classes, he said. And I said, no, I pretended I didn't know, but sure, we all know. He said, they were causing chaos. He said, they weren't interested in studying, they weren't interested in doing anything. He said, all they were interested in was picking fights and just being disruptive because they had to be there by law. They weren't interested being there to learn anything. They just needed to be there because they had to be there, and the minute it was over, they were gone out the door. And either they're out the back, smoking cigarettes and whatever. But he said, do you know, he said, come to think of it, that child with a disability, he said, changed the dynamics of that class, he said. And I said to him, what do you mean? And he said, it's funny, he said. The bully, there was one particular boy, he said, in that class, and he was a right troublemaker, he said. And you know what, he said, he ended up becoming, the bully ended up becoming the protector. And that child was, hugging all these macho men in the class and showing them humanity, possibly showing them kindness that maybe some of them never got at home. That child taught them humanity. He said that it calmed down the class. They all became very more polite and courteous to one another. He said that child taught them more than I could as a teacher. Isn't that an amazing story? Isn't it? It's absolutely amazing.
When I talk to people about the Eighth Amendment, you see, I look at this from a holistic perspective. It's not just polarized. I'm looking at it from a holistic perspective. I see women who can't have children, and I see women who have children and who don't want those children. And I'm thinking there has to be some middle ground here where we can do something so that women can help women. There's so much pain and so much upset and loss and anger. That in a sense is that what we need to do is we need to step outside the pain. And what we need to do is we need to focus on the positive thing. And the positive thing is that there's a little life there that can bring joy to the world. And that basically, is it because we're so caught up in our own pain, is it that we seem to forget about that other little life? We haven't thought this through. We haven't thought about the mother and her baby, and we haven't thought about the baby. Let's have the debate.
There is no difference between a child inside the womb or outside the womb. A baby's heartbeat starts at 22 days. It is a life, while others may try to convince us otherwise, but science does not lie. It is a human being, an unborn baby. Our Constitution is possibly one of the best charters for human rights in the world, and it is unprecedented that our politicians are now asking us to delete fundamental rights from our Constitution. The politicians want us to replace the Eighth Amendment with the following wording, and I'll read it out. Provision may be made at law for the regulation of termination of pregnancy. So in essence, the politicians are asking us to give them full power to decide what our abortion laws in Ireland shall be, and that they are taking that right away from the Irish people to decide what abortion laws should be in Ireland. If the politicians decide to bring into Ireland the most liberal abortion laws in the world by inserting that new clause in our Constitution, it strengthens the presumption of constitutionality that would attach to legislation dealing with abortion, making it less likely for a constitutional challenge to succeed. And interestingly enough, what Professor Jerry White in Trinity College, who's a senior lecturer in constitutional law, says that once we delete the constitutional protection for the unborn in our Constitution, the Constitution would have to be construed now as protecting only the constitutional rights of the mother to autonomy, privacy, and bodily integrity, all of which would support a constitutional right to an abortion, and that it would be constitutionally very difficult to legislate for a restrictive abortion regime. In the recent Supreme Court case of M versus the Minister for Justice and Equality, the Supreme Court have declared that once we delete the Eighth Amendment, there will be no further constitutional protection for the unborn child. Let us use our vote wisely. Let's vote no. Let us celebrate the gift of life. Thank you.